I'm going to be giving a relatively quick update to the state of the Methow project. This is a project that we initiated a few years ago, and the idea was to collect a lot of information about the existing conditions of the Methow Valley, from habitat conditions to demographics and development, recreational use, wildfires. And we looked over a 15-year period from 2005 to 2020. And then the intent is to do that comprehensive assessment once every 5 years, but more frequently than that to analyze some of the key data with demographics and land use. So I'm going to be presenting on the last 3 years, so 2020 to 2023, the demographic and land use data. And as kind of a background to this project, the reason we wanted to do this is because we were, we're all experiencing changes to this valley, like a lot of mountain towns. And a lot of people have ideas about that change and how much it's changing. Like, people say, oh, wow, our population seems like it's doubled in 2 years. Like, well, has it really doubled in 2 years? So we wanted to develop a consistent database that people can go to and really understand what the facts are to be able to make better decisions moving forward. So I'm going to be talking about different areas a little bit, as indicated on this map. So when I talk about a community, I'm talking about communities of Mazama, Winthrop, Twisp, Carlton, Methow, and Pateros by those different colors. That's based on their zip code. One thing to point out is that Mazama is probably smaller than you think of Mazama. So you probably think of Edelweiss as being part of Mazama, but in this context, it is not. So what you have here, the highest line is the overall population, and then the next line down is full-time and then part-time. So in the last 3 years, our average annual population growth has been about 3.8%. And that is similar to the annual growth from 2005 to 2010 when things were really booming. So we've had high population growth relatively in the last few years. And the percent of full-time to part-time has remained pretty static. It's about 60 to 40% overall, that ratio. In the last 3 years, we've had a little bit more growth in part-time than in full-time, but generally that relationship stays about the same. So now we're looking at development trends, those same development trends, but broken down by those communities I mentioned. And so one of the interesting things in the last few years is that more of the development has occurred in the lower valley. So up until the last few years, we were really seeing, Mazama and Winthrop as the fastest growing areas, and then kind of slower and slower as you got down valley. But now, at least in the last few years, that trend is kind of reversed. So whether that stays or not, we'll see. And then we look at development in town versus outside of town. And when I say in town here, I'm talking about within town boundaries. So truly of incorporated towns, which for us are Winthrop and Twisp. And as a conservation organization, we are always trying to have development be either within town or near town and protect the lands farther out that provide greater habitat value. What we see in the last few years is that about 550 residential parcels have been developed in that time period, and about 20% of those are within towns, 80% outside of towns. Towns also have fewer parcels available for development, so overall, if you look at the rate of development, is a little bit higher within towns than outside of towns in the last few years. And then we look at building permits, residential building permits, as an index of what's to come, because people apply for a permit and then usually a year, or now it might even be more like 2 years out, their homes get developed. So it's really a forecasting tool for us. What this graph is showing, the different colors are different communities. So if you add them up in total, you get the development over a given year. So again, starting at 2005, you see that really high overall series of colors, that's when things were really booming. And then the recession happened and it dropped down. And then 2021 here, looked like we were going towards a peak, but then it's actually gone down again in 2022. And then what we see this year so far is that we have less permits than even last year. So year to date, last year we had 34 new residence permits issued, and then, 53, and then this year 34. So most likely for 2023, we're going to be, down here, much lower. So presumably over the next couple of years, our population growth rate will be declining, is what I anticipate. We also look at housing price trends, which are very extreme in their acceleration and appear to be continuing that way. And then recreation is hard to get a handle on to quantify it. And the best data we have is really from Methow Trails, from their skiing passes. And yes, not everybody skis, but it does kind of give you a general trend of outdoor recreation in general. So this right here, this was COVID. So that was the biggest peak. So basically, as we'll probably have all experienced, when we're outdoors recreating in one form or another, we're seeing more and more people on the landscape. And that's basically what these data are showing. COVID was a particularly high time for recreational use, and it's gone down a little bit, but still overall, it's much higher than it was in, the years 5 years and prior to that. For more information, you can go to our website. It'll have these data as well as some other parameters like wildfire and fish, teeny fish data, some other things on there. And then in another couple years, we'll have a much more comprehensive assessment.